I used to think my life had already reached its quiet end inside those white hospital walls. 10 years locked away at Crestwood State Hospital had a way of numbing everything, your fears, your rage, even your hope. But that day shattered the silence I had built around my heart. My name is Nia, and my twin sister's name is Lisa. We were identical in every way. Same smile, same eyes, same dimples. But while her heart was soft as rain, mine had turned to stone long ago. People called me unstable, dangerous. The doctors had gentler words, impulse control disorder. I called it feeling too much. Every emotion inside me was turned up to 10. When I loved, I wanted to protect the world. When I hated, I could burn it down. That fire once saved Lisa's life and ruined mine. I still remember that day when we were 16. Some boy tried to drag her into an alley after school. Before I even realized it, I picked up a chair and shattered his arm. The crack of his bone still echoes in my head sometimes. The world didn't see a sister defending her twin. They saw a monster. Within months, I was gone, locked away for treatment. 10 years passed in that little room. My only company was the sound of metal doors and the screams of the other patients. I read, I worked out, I learned to control the beast inside me. My body grew stronger, my mind sharper. I learned to breathe through the chaos, but never to forget. Lisa visited often, always smiling, always pretending she was okay. She brought fruit, pastries, and stories of her husband Darius, a man I never liked. His eyes were cold, like someone used to being obeyed. I warned her, but she said, "It's a blessing anyone wants me, Nia." Every time she said that, I wanted to shake her, but I couldn't do anything from behind glass walls. Then came the visit that changed everything. That morning, I woke up with a strange heaviness in my chest. The sky outside was gray, as if the world itself was holding its breath. When the iron door creaked open, I expected Lisa's usual shy smile. Instead, I saw a ghost. Her face was pale and hollow. Her blouse, buttoned to the neck despite the summer heat, couldn't hide the bruises beneath. Her eyes, my eyes, were lifeless. I stepped closer. "Lisa, what happened?" She smiled, but her lips trembled. "Oh, it's nothing. I fell off my bike." A lie. I reached out and touched her cheek. She flinched, and when I pulled back her sleeve, I saw it. Bruises, old and new, scattered across her arms like a map of torment. "Who did this?" I whispered. Her hands shook. And then she broke. She fell to her knees, clutching my legs, sobbing so hard her voice cracked. "It's Darius," she cried. "He hits me, Nia. He hits me, and he hits Sky, too." Sky, her little girl, my niece. For a second, I couldn't breathe. My blood turned to fire. 10 years of silence, 10 years of suppressed rage, all of it awakened in that moment. I lifted my sister up, held her trembling hands, and looked into the mirror on the wall. 2 faces, one broken, one burning. That was the moment I made my choice. If the world thought I was a monster, then maybe it was time I became one again for her. That night, I stopped being the patient of Crestwood Hospital and began becoming the storm that would tear her abusers apart. Lisa's sobs echoed in that sterile white room long after her voice broke. I had seen broken bones before. Bruises fade, ribs heal, but what she carried in her eyes, that didn't heal. That was the look of someone who had forgotten what it meant to feel safe. She told me everything in fragments, as if afraid that even the walls would report her words. Darius, the husband I had warned her about, wasn't just cruel, he was vicious. He gambled every penny, and when luck turned against him, he turned against her. When he was drunk, she was his punching bag. When he was sober, she was his servant. And his family? Monsters wearing the masks of in-laws. His mother, Mrs. Bell, treated my sister like dirt, made her scrub floors until her knuckles bled, forced her to hand-wash their laundry like a maid. His sister, Trina, was no better, a grown woman who lived off her mother yet ordered Lisa around like a servant. Even her bratty son, Julian, tormented little Sky every day. Lisa's hand shook as she spoke. Her voice cracked when she said, "Nia, they hurt Sky too." I froze. "What did you say?" She nodded, her whole body trembling. "Yesterday Darius lost money. He came home drunk. Sky was crying because Julian pulled her hair, and he slapped her. A 3-year-old, Nia. He hit her so hard she couldn't even scream. Something in me snapped. For 10 years, I had tried to be better. The doctors told me to breathe, to count, to meditate. They taught me to suppress my anger, to let go of the past. But sitting there, listening to my sister cry, I realized something. Anger isn't always a curse. Sometimes it's justice wearing armor. Lisa looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. I can't live like this anymore. I can't protect Sky. I took her hands in mine. You don't have to, she frowned. What do you mean? I stood, walked over to the small metal mirror on the wall, and stared at our reflections. 2 identical faces stared back, one broken, one reborn. You didn't come here today to visit me, I said softly. You came here to trade places. Lisa froze. What? No. Nia, don't say that. You've been locked up for 10 years. You don't know the world anymore. You wouldn't survive. I turned to her, my voice calm and cold. You think I survived here by luck? I've lived among the worst kinds of monsters, Lisa. The only difference is mine were locked up. Yours are walking free. She shook her head, terrified. But the paperwork, the guards. I've watched this place for a decade, I interrupted. I know every shift change, every nurse's habit. They think we're identical, and you've got the same ID bracelet. You'll stay quiet. They won't even notice. Lisa stared at me, tears welling up again. You can't. They'll hurt you, Nia. I smiled faintly. They'll try. The bell rang. Visiting hours ending. I grabbed her shoulders and looked into her eyes. Listen carefully. From now on, you're Nia. You stay here. From now on, you're Nia. You stay here. Read my books. Stay quiet. And let them think I've finally calmed down. I'll handle everything else. She hesitated, her lips trembling. And Sky, I'll get her out, I whispered. I promise. She didn't speak. She just nodded, defeated by hope and fear all at once. We switched clothes, her old worn blouse for my gray hospital uniform, her scent, faint soap and sorrow, clung to me. I gave her my ID bracelet, tucked her house keys into my pocket, and hugged her tight. Don't move from here. No matter what happens, stay silent. As the door creaked open, I walked out, pretending to be Lisa. The nurse glanced at me and smiled. Goodbye, Mrs. Rakes. Have a good day. I nodded weakly, mimicking my sister's timid smile. And just like that, after 10 long years, I stepped into the sunlight again. The world smelled of dust, gasoline, and vengeance. I clutched the keys in my pocket. Darius Rakes, I whispered, let's meet. The world thought I'd left Crestwood State Hospital. They didn't realize I'd brought the hospital's demon out with me. The bus ride back to Lisa's neighborhood felt endless. Each bump in the road jarred me closer to the storm inside me. I sat in the corner seat, clutching her bag and trying to breathe through the fire that was crawling up my throat. 10 years behind hospital walls had taught me patience, but patience can turn poisonous when mixed with rage. The city had changed. Taller buildings, new faces, louder streets, but the darkness in people's eyes stayed the same. And as I got closer to the east side, everything started to decay. The sidewalks cracked, the air thickened with smoke, and the smell of desperation clung to every wall. Lisa had told me once, it's not a home, Nia, it's just a place I survive in. Now I understood. When I finally stood before her house, my heart clenched. A rusted iron gate hung off its hinges, and the walls were stained with age and neglect. It wasn't a home. It was a cage painted brown. I opened the gate slowly. It groaned, as if even the metal was tired of the misery inside. The moment I stepped in, I was hit by a stench. Sour food, damp clothes, and something else. Hopelessness. Dishes piled on the table, half-eaten food swarming with flies, clothes scattered across the sofa. The air was heavy, suffocating. And then I saw her. A tiny girl, no more than 3, sitting in a corner by the cabinet, barefoot, clutching a headless doll to her chest. My niece, Sky. Her dress was torn, her hair tangled, and her eyes, those big brown eyes, once full of life, now held only fear. I softened my tone. Sky, baby? She startled, clutching the doll tighter, her body tense like a frightened kitten. It's me, I said softly, kneeling. Mommy's here. But instead of running into my arms, she shrank back, as if afraid that even love could hurt. My chest ached. What had they done to this child? Before I could speak again, a voice slithered from behind me, cold, mocking. Well, look who decided to crawl back. I turned. A short, heavy woman stood in the doorway, wearing cheap floral pajamas and holding a fan. Her lips curled into disgust. Back from your little visit to the crazy one, huh? Did she teach you how to act insane, Mrs. Bell? Lisa's mother-in-law. I straightened slowly, keeping my expression calm. She sneered. What are you staring at, useless woman? You think you're better than me? You don't even earn a dime, and you dare look me in the eye? I met her gaze, steady, unblinking. For the first time, she faltered. Before she could speak again, another voice echoed from the hallway. Mom, stop wasting your breath on her. Tell her to cook something. I'm starving. A heavy-set woman with fake blonde hair appeared, Trina, the sister-in-law. Behind her, a little boy waddled in smirking. Julian! The child spotted Sky's doll and snatched it from her hands. Mine! Sky cried. Give it back, please. Julian threw it against the wall. Who plays with this trash? He shoved Sky hard, and she fell to the floor, clutching her knee in pain. The laughter that followed from Trina and Mrs. Bell chilled my blood. I felt something inside me shift. Quiet, dangerous. 10 years of training had taught me how to stay calm. 10 years of silence had taught me how to strike when it mattered. I walked over slowly, crouched beside Julian, and took his little ankle in my hand. Let go, he yelled. My grip tightened, not enough to hurt, just enough for him to feel the power he had mocked. Listen carefully, I said softly. If you ever touch her again, I'll break this leg in two. The boy froze. Trina rushed forward, shrieking, Are you insane? Let go of my son. I stood up, my eyes burning into hers. Tell him to apologize. Now. She blinked, shocked. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not Lisa. Not anyone. For the first time in years, they saw something they had never seen in Lisa. Defiant. I bent down and picked up the broken doll, dusted it off, and handed it to Sky. Go to your room, sweetheart, I said gently. Mommy will handle this. She obeyed, clutching the doll close. When the door shut behind her, I looked back at the two women. My voice was calm. Too calm, too calm, too calm. From now on, I said, this house is going to have rules. They thought Lisa had come home. But that night, they would meet someone else entirely, the woman they should have never crossed. The silence that followed my words was thick enough to choke on. Mrs. Bell blinked, confused. Trina froze mid-step. Even little Julian stood still, his eyes wide with disbelief. They weren't used to Lisa talking like this. The Lisa they knew whispered apologies for things she didn't do. She bent her head, cried quietly, and begged for mercy. But I wasn't Lisa. I was the storm that 10 years of confinement had forged. Mrs. Bell's face twisted with fury. Rules? You are talking about rules? In my house? She picked up her fan again, waving it like a weapon. You've lost your mind, girl. Maybe your crazy sister rubbed off on you. I smiled faintly. Maybe she did. Trina scoffed, crossing her arms. Mom, don't waste your breath. She's just trying to act brave. She'll be on her knees again by tomorrow. Their words slid off me like raindrops off steel. I wasn't here to argue. I was here to change the hierarchy of this hellhole. Dinner, Mrs. Bell snapped. Since you want rules, start by following mine. Go cook that fish we bought yesterday. Make it salty and dry like you always do. That's all you're good for. I nodded. Of course, mother-in-law. Her lips curled into a smug smile, thinking she had won that round. And don't you dare talk back again, or I understand. I cut her off softly. She blinked, startled. My tone was polite, but underneath it, there was something that made even her hardened spirit flinch. I walked into the kitchen. The smell of rot and old grease hit me like a wall. On the counter sat a half-spoiled tilapia, gray and slimy. I rolled up my sleeves. If they wanted dinner, they would get it, their way. I cleaned the fish with methodical precision, the same way I used to fold my hospital bed every morning. Every movement, calm, controlled, focused. Then I did exactly what Mrs. Bell demanded, poured half a bag of salt into the pot, and let the stew cook until the fish burned black. The smell was unbearable, like bitterness itself. When I set the table, the three of them were already seated. "Dinner's ready," I said quietly. They stared at the dishes, rice, a few wilted vegetables, and the blackened fish still sizzling from the pan. Mrs. Bell reached for the first bite. The moment it touched her tongue, her face contorted. "What is this filth?" she spat. "It's salt. You're trying to poison me." I kept my gaze steady. "You told me to make it salty and dry. I just followed your instructions. You!" She stood abruptly, rage flooding her cheeks red. "You dare talk back to me?" Before she could lift her hand, I slammed my palm on the table, hard. The plates rattled. The air trembled. "Sit down." My voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of every scream I had swallowed over 10 years. Mrs. Bell froze. Her hand hovered in midair. Trina's jaw dropped. "Sit," I repeated, calm and cold. And she did. For the first time, that woman, the queen of cruelty, obeyed. I leaned forward slightly. "Eat. Don't waste food. You've lost your mind," Trina whispered. "Maybe," I said softly, picking up a spoon. "But if being sane means watching you hurt a child, I'd rather stay mad." Mrs. Bell shoved the plate away, shaking. You think you can scare me? You're just a weak little girl." I smiled. "Weak girls don't survive 10 years in a place like Crestwood." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut glass. Even Julian didn't dare breathe too loud. Then I stood, turned toward the kitchen, and spoke without looking back. "From now on, meals will be cooked my way. Sky eats first. Nobody touches her food. And if anyone raises a hand to her again—" I turned my head slightly, meeting Mrs. Bell's eyes. "Ooh, they'll lose that hand." I left the room, letting the quiet terror settle where their laughter used to live. That night, when I tucked Sky into bed, she whispered softly, "Mommy's voice sounds different." I brushed her hair gently. "That's because Mommy stopped being scared." She smiled faintly before drifting into sleep. I sat beside her, watching her breathe, feeling the old rage curling in my chest like smoke. This house had lived off my sister's pain long enough. Now it would learn what it meant to fear. They thought they'd broken Lisa's spirit forever, but they didn't know. She'd sent them someone who couldn't be broken. The house was silent that night, too silent. Even the walls seemed to hold their breath. Mrs. Bell had retreated to her room after dinner, muttering curses under her breath. Trina followed soon after, dragging her spoiled son with her. For the first time in years, the house was still. But I knew it wasn't peace. It was fear disguised as quiet. Sky slept soundly beside me, her tiny hand gripping mine. Her breathing was soft, fragile. I didn't sleep. I sat awake, staring at the door, waiting. Lisa had told me everything about Darius, his temper, his gambling, his nightly routine. "He always comes home after 11, she'd said, "usually drunk, sometimes bleeding." The clock on the wall ticked toward 11,030. Then came the sound, a motorcycle's engine coughing in the distance, followed by the screech of brakes and a string of drunken curses. He was home. The door burst open with a loud kick. A tall man stumbled in, his body broad, his shirt half open, smelling of cheap liquor and bad decisions. His eyes were bloodshot, his knuckles bruised, and his smirk carried the kind of arrogance only cowards wear. "Lisa," he bellowed, slamming the door behind him. "Where's my dinner? Where's my wife?" I didn't move. He looked around, his gaze landing on the broken dishes from earlier, the burned fish still on the table. His face darkened. "What the hell is this? You call this dinner?" He grabbed a plate and threw it across the room. It shattered against the wall. "Lisa," he shouted again, "get out here before I'm here." He froze when he saw me standing in the doorway of the bedroom. I had changed into a simple dress, Lisa's old one, but there was nothing timid in the way I stood. For a moment he blinked, confused. Then his lips curled. "Oh, so now you decide to show up? Took you long enough." He swaggered toward me, the stench of alcohol thick in the air. "Pour me some water," he demanded. I didn't move. He frowned. "Did you not hear me?" "I heard you." "Then do it." I tilted my head slightly, studying him. "You've been drinking," he chuckled. "And what if I have?" "You planning to lecture me now, huh?" He reached out, his hand aiming for my cheek. That familiar slap he had thrown 1,000 times before. But this time, his hand never landed. I caught his wrist midair. For a split second, confusion flashed across his face. then shock. He tried to yank free, but my grip tightened like steel. 10 years of training against padded walls had made me stronger than most men could imagine. What the? I twisted his wrist slightly. The sound of bone popping filled the room. He screamed, stumbling backward. My hand! What did you... Does it hurt? I asked softly. Good. He glared at me, sweat forming on his forehead. You've lost your mind. You think you can hit me? I stepped forward, cutting off his words. My eyes met his, calm and deadly. You've been hitting Lisa for 7 years, I said slowly. You've hit your wife, you've hit your daughter, you've hit everything smaller than you. But you made one mistake tonight. He backed up, trembling. What mistake? I smiled faintly. You came home to me. You crazy. Before he could finish, my palm met his cheek with a sound that cracked through the silence like thunder. It wasn't just a slap, it was judgment. He staggered back, hitting the wall. I grabbed him by the collar, pulled him close, and whispered, that was for Lisa. Then I hit him again, harder. And that was for Sky. He collapsed onto the floor, dazed, whimpering like a wounded dog. Get up, I said coldly. Men like you don't deserve the ground they walk on. He crawled away, mumbling curses, but his fear betrayed him. He had hit countless women before, but tonight he had finally met one who hit back. I turned, adjusting the strap of my dress, my voice low and steady. From now on, if you want to raise your hand in this house, I paused, letting the words hang heavy in the air, you'll need to ask me first. Darius thought he'd seen his wife. But what stood before him wasn't a woman begging for mercy. It was the ghost of every bruise he'd ever left behind. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the cracked blinds, crawling across the floor like a timid visitor. The air inside that house felt different, thicker, heavier. Darius didn't go to work. He sat on the edge of the sofa, his wrist bandaged, his face swollen from last night's slap. I watched him quietly from the kitchen, making breakfast for Sky. He wouldn't look at me. He didn't yell. He didn't dare. For the first time, the silence belonged to me. I placed a plate of warm food in front of Sky. She stared at it like she was dreaming. For me? She whispered. Yes, I said softly. For you first. Her small hands trembled as she picked up the spoon. Mrs. Bell and Trina were standing near the hallway, their faces tight with disbelief. The Queen and her princess of cruelty didn't like the new rules, but they were too shocked to challenge them yet. Mother-in-law, I said, without turning, there's food for everyone, but Sky eats before anyone else. Mrs. Bell's face twisted. You're out of your mind. Since when do children? Since now? She froze. The calm in my voice seemed to scare her more than any scream could. Darius finally spoke, his tone flat, bitter. You think one slap makes you powerful? I looked at him. No, Darius, I think your silence this morning does. He glared at me but said nothing. He couldn't. Fear had started to eat away at his pride. Trina leaned toward her mother, whispering loudly enough for me to hear, She's possessed. That hospital changed her. She's going to destroy this family. I smiled faintly. You say that like it's a bad thing. Mrs. Bell banged her fist on the wall. You listen to me, Lisa. This is my house. You're a guest here. You eat what I allow. You speak when I allow. Do you understand? I turned slowly, wiped my hands on the apron, and walked up to her. Her chin lifted in defiance, but her eyes flickered. Let me be clear, I said softly. You don't own this house. You own the misery in it. And I've come to collect every debt you've ever created. For a moment, no one breathed. Then, as if on cue, the front door opened. A neighbor stepped in, an older woman with kind eyes carrying a basket of fruit. Morning, Mrs. Bell, she said. I just wanted to check if everything's all right. Heard some noise last night. Mrs. Bell stiffened. Nothing's wrong, she snapped. Mind your own business. But I smiled warmly. Thank you for checking, I said. We had a little accident, but everyone's fine. The woman nodded, looking between us. You look different, Lisa, she said softly. Stronger somehow. I met her gaze. I finally learned that silence doesn't keep the peace. It just feeds the monsters. When she left, the room was frozen again. Mrs. Bell's cheeks were red. Trina's jaw was clenched. Darius was sweating. I picked up the plates from the table one by one. I'm going to the market later, I said calmly. Sky needs new clothes, and from now on her meals will be made separately. She's not eating whatever scraps you people leave behind. Mrs. Bell muttered something under her breath, but her voice shook. Darius's eyes darted toward the door, as if thinking of escape. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I leaned closer, my tone low. Go ahead, Darius. Try shouting again. Try raising your hand. But remember, every time you do, I'll remind you what fear tastes like. He flinched. His pride wanted to rise, but his broken wrist reminded him who he was dealing with now. That evening, while Sky watched cartoons, I found an old notebook in Lisa's drawer. Inside were bruised fingerprints of her life bills, scribbled apologies, and tear stains on every other page. I traced my fingers over her handwriting. He hit me again, Sky cried. I pretended to smile. I closed the notebook, my chest burning. Not anymore, I whispered. That night, I sat by the window with Sky sleeping peacefully beside me. I could hear them whispering in the next room. Darius, Trina, Mrs. Bell. Their voices were sharp, fearful. She's not Lisa, Mrs. Bell hissed. She's that crazy sister. I can see it in her eyes. Trina whispered back, Then what do we do? Mrs. Bell's answer chilled the air. If the mad one escaped, then it's time we send her back. They thought they could break me with the same old tricks. But this time, the prey they were hunting was already hunting them. The next few days were quiet, too quiet. That kind of silence doesn't come from peace. It comes from plotting. The shift in the air was subtle, but I could feel it. Mrs. Bell's eyes followed me longer than usual. Trina's laughter sounded too forced, too sweet. Even Darius, who once barked orders like a king, now moved around the house like a shadow watching, waiting. But I'd lived among worse. In Crestwood Hospital, silence always meant someone was planning something. You learned to listen to footsteps more than words. That evening, while Sky napped, I caught the faintest whisper through the thin hallway wall. She's not right in the head, Mrs. Bell hissed. That woman's dangerous. Trina murmured, You think it's really her? The crazy one? Who else would look me in the eye like that? Mrs. Bell snapped. Lisa couldn't even breathe without asking permission. This one, she talks like she owns us. A pause. Then Trina's low voice, trembling with fear and anger. If it's her, we can't keep her here. What if she hurts Julian? I pressed closer to the wall, holding my breath. Mrs. Bell's tone hardened. Then we'll send her back where she belongs. I'll call that doctor, what's his name? The one who came here years ago when Lisa tried to leave Darius. Dr. Holt. He'll know what to do. We'll tell him she's unstable again. I smiled faintly. Of course. Manipulation wrapped in concern. Trina whispered, But she won't go quietly. Then we'll make her go quietly, Mrs. Bell replied. A little sleeping powder in her tea, and the ambulance will do the rest. I stepped back from the wall, calm but burning inside. They didn't know who they were dealing with. That night, I made sure they believed I was none the wiser. I smiled during dinner, hummed while washing dishes, even thanked Trina for handing me a cup of tea. She smiled back, too sweetly. The tea was dark, murky. A faint scent of crushed pills hid beneath the sugar. I lifted the cup, pretending to sip. You added something new, I said, tilting my head. Trina froze. Just, honey. I smiled. It's nice. I set it down gently. Minutes later, I excused myself and went to the bathroom. I poured the tea down the drain, watching the liquid swirl like poison, leaving a wound. By the time I returned, Mrs. Bell was sitting in the living room pretending to watch TV, but her eyes flickered toward me every few seconds. I sat down across from her. It's funny, I said softly. When people think they're safe behind lies, they start to look nervous. They twitch, they fidget, they can't hold still. Her fan stopped midair. What are you talking about? Oh, nothing, I said with a smile. Just something I learned in Crestwood. Liars always show their guilt in their hands. I looked pointedly at hers, trembling slightly. She set the fan down, her mouth dry. Go to bed, Lisa. You're rambling again. I stood, leaned in close enough for her to smell the faint hint of lavender from the hospital soap, still lingering on my skin. Tell Dr. Holt, I whispered, that if he comes here, he should bring his own medicine, because I don't take anything. I didn't make myself any more. Her face drained of color. I walked away slowly, feeling her eyes on my back, fearful, confused, desperate. Later that night, I slipped into Sky's room. She stirred, half asleep. Mommy? I brushed her hair back. Go back to sleep, baby. We're almost done here. Because I wasn't just defending my sister's child anymore, I was preparing to burn down the empire of pain they'd built brick by brick. As I watched the moonlight spill across the floor, one thought circled in my mind like a heartbeat. They think they can drug me, silence me, and send me back. But they've forgotten. I was born in silence, and I learned to turn it into power. They thought they'd trap me with their little plan. But I was never the one in the cage. They were. Morning sunlight crept across the living room floor, but it brought no warmth with it. The house felt uneasy, like it knew something terrible was about to happen. I could hear the whispers again, Mrs. Bell's voice sharp as ever. He's coming today. I told him she's not taking her medicine, that she's violent again. Trina's nervous reply, and what if she attacks him? Then we'll have proof, Mrs. Bell hissed. They'll sedate her and drag her back to that hospital where she belongs. I sat at the kitchen table, slicing apples for Sky's lunch, smiling to myself. Let them play their game. I'd already written the ending. By noon, a dark car pulled up outside the house. The sound of its engine made Mrs. Bell straighten her back like she was welcoming royalty. I dried my hands and waited by the doorway. The man who stepped out looked exactly like the kind of doctor who'd mistake cruelty for care. Polished shoes, cold eyes, and a smile practiced in mirrors. "Ah," he said as he entered. "Mrs. Rakes. It's been a long time." I tilted my head. He blinked, surprised. "You don't remember me?" "I'm Dr. Holt. We spoke when you were receiving treatment." I studied his face, the way his eyes didn't quite meet mine, the way he scanned the room like a predator waiting for weakness. "I remember you," I said softly. "You're the one who told my sister that pain makes people obedient." Mrs. Bell's fan froze midair. "She's delusional, Doctor. You see, she's confusing reality again." Dr. Holt chuckled politely. "That's all right. These lapses are common when patients get medication." He turned to me. "Lisa, your mother-in-law tells me you've been acting erratic, talking back, showing aggression. Is that true?" I smiled. I'd call it self-respect, but I understand how that might look strange to people who've never had any. Trina gasped. Mrs. Bell's face turned crimson. "Doctor, you see how she talks?" she snapped. "This woman isn't my daughter-in-law anymore. She's a stranger. She's that twin, the crazy one." Dr. Holt's expression darkened. "Twin? What twin?" I folded my arms. "I see they've conveniently forgotten to mention that part," Mrs. Bell stammered. She switched places, Doctor. The dangerous one escaped and took Lisa's place." Dr. Holt turned toward me, suspicion flickering in his eyes. "Is that true?" I looked him dead in the eye. "Does it matter which one I am?" "If you can't tell the difference, maybe you're the one who should have been in Crestwood." He took a step back. "That's enough. Mrs. Rakes, please sit down." I didn't move. "You think you can drug me and drag me away again? You think I haven't seen men like you before, the ones who smile while they lock women away?" I stepped closer. "Do you even know what Lisa wrote in her letters?" "The ones you ignored?" Dr. Holt blinked. "Letters?" I walked to the drawer, pulled out the old notebook I'd found, Lisa's notebook, and slammed it on the table. Every bruise, every scream, every time she begged for help, it's all in here. "And you called it hysteria." Mrs. Bell lunged forward. "Don't you dare!" I spun on her. "You shut your mouth." "You shut your mouth." "You made her believe she deserved the pain. You fed her lies about obedience and respect while your son destroyed her." Dr. Holt reached into his bag, fumbling for something, a small syringe. "Sit down," he ordered, voice low. "You're agitated." I smiled slowly. "You're trembling." He froze. "I spent 10 years watching men with needles." "You don't scare me, Doctor." Before he could blink, I grabbed his wrist, not violently, just firmly, and plucked the syringe from his hand. "Next time," I said, "try being honest about who you're trying to sedate." I snapped the needle in half and dropped it in the trash. Mrs. Bell looked horrified. Trina's face went white. Even Darius, who just stepped in from the doorway, stared in disbelief. I turned to him. "You brought him here to silence me, didn't you?" Darius didn't answer. I walked closer until my face was inches from his. "If you ever try that again, Darius, if you so much as whisper my name to another man like him, I will show you what real madness looks like." The doctor grabbed his bag and bolted toward the door. I'm not getting involved in this, he muttered. Mrs. Bell called after him, Doctor, wait! But he was gone. The room fell silent. I looked at the three of them and said quietly, Next time you invite someone into this house to destroy me, make sure they're not weaker than the monster you created. Then I turned, walked to Sky's room, and closed the door behind me. For the first time, I saw her smiling in her sleep, peaceful, safe, and I realized something terrifying. Maybe I didn't just want revenge anymore. Maybe I wanted redemption. They tried to bring the doctor to take me away, but all they did was bring me proof that monsters wear white coats too. For 2 full days after the doctor fled, no one dared raise their voice. Even the walls seemed to listen when I walked past. But silence never lasts in a house built on cruelty. Soon I could feel the tension crawling back like smoke seeping through cracks. Darius stopped looking me in the eye. He spent hours on the phone, whispering behind half-closed doors, lowering his voice whenever I walked by. Old habits. I recognized the signs of someone hiding rot. One afternoon, while Sky napped, I decided to follow the trail. He always kept his leather briefcase locked under the coffee table, pretending it was full of work papers. Lisa once told me she'd never seen inside. When he left for his errands, I waited until the sound of his motorcycle faded down the street. Then I fetched a small pin from the sewing box, crouched beside the case, and picked the cheap lock in seconds. Inside wasn't paperwork. It was a different kind of poison, stacks of unpaid bills, gambling slips from underground betting halls, and at the very bottom, a worn brown ledger. Each page listed numbers beside names, debt totals, dates. At first I didn't understand. Then I saw it, Lisa's name. $10,000, written in Darius's jagged scrawl. Beside it, paid with favor. My stomach turned. He hadn't just gambled away his money, he gambled away his family's dignity. Lisa must have been covering his debt, begging friends for loans, maybe even working late at odd jobs to save him. And when she couldn't pay, he used her body as bargaining chip. The monster I'd slapped wasn't just a cruel husband, he was a coward living off the suffering of women. I flipped another page and froze. One of the names was underlined twice. R. Marlowe, $15,000. Due next week. A memory sparked. Lisa mentioning Mr. Marlowe, the man who owned Darius's auto shop. She said he came by when Darius was in trouble. Now I knew what kind of trouble. My pulse quickened. If Marlowe came to collect and didn't get his money, he'd come for something else, and this time he'd find me waiting. I closed the briefcase and slipped the ledger into the hem of my coat. When Darius came home that night, I was stirring soup like nothing had changed. Rough day? I asked lightly. He grunted, wiping sweat from his brow. Don't start. I wasn't starting anything, I said, tasting the soup, just wondering how long a man can run from debts before they catch him. He froze halfway to the fridge. What did you say? Nothing, I replied. But if you're hiding something, Darius, you might want to clean it up before someone else finds it. His jaw tightened. You've been snooping. I met his glare calmly. I've been living here. There's a difference. He stepped closer, his voice low. You think you're smart, huh? You don't know who you're dealing with. Oh, I do, I said softly. A man who can't stand to be seen by the mirror he married. His nostrils flared. For a moment I thought he'd raise his hand again, but his wrist still ached and memory stopped him. He turned away, muttering curses under his breath. When he disappeared into the bedroom, I exhaled slowly. The storm was coming, and it wasn't just between us. Later that night, when everyone slept, I sat by the window with the ledger open in my lap. The moonlight made the ink shimmer like dried blood. At the bottom of the last page, in smaller writing, was one final note. Marlowe threatened to take Lisa next time. My heart stopped. He hadn't been bluffing. Lisa had been living under that threat before she ever came to me. I looked toward Sky's room, her tiny shadow rising and falling with each breath, and made a silent vow. Marlowe would not touch a single hair on that child's head, and if Darius thought he could sell his family's safety again, he was about to learn that I didn't gamble. I collected. They thought the danger was inside the house. But the real threat was already on its way, and this time I wasn't waiting behind a locked door. 3 nights passed before the storm came knocking. Literally, it was late past midnight, and the house was asleep. The air felt heavy, thick with secrets. I was sitting by the window reading Lisa's notebook again when the knock came. 3 slow, deliberate thuds. Not polite, not impatient, confident, the kind of knock that knew it would be answered. I stood up quietly and moved toward the door. Through the peephole, I saw a man in a dark gray suit, tall and built like a wall. His hair was slicked back, and when he lifted his head, I saw a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Marlowe. I opened the door just enough to look at him. It's late. His grin widened. Lisa rakes. Still polite. Even when your husband owes me 15 grand. That's impressive. He's not here. I know, he said, stepping closer. That's why I came to talk to you. Darius has been avoiding my calls. That's a problem, but since you share his name, I figured we could work something out. His tone oozed suggestion. I'd heard that tone before, from men who thought cruelty was currency. Behind me, I heard a faint rustle, Mrs. Bell peeking from her room. I shot her a look that froze her in place. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. We can talk here, he smirked. So he finally let you out of the house, huh? I remember when you used to bring him lunch to the garage. Always looked scared. I like that about you. The words slithered between us like poison. I took a step closer, lowering my voice. You want your money, right? Of course, he said, though I don't mind other kinds of payment if you're short. I smiled. Calm, slow, dangerous. How about I pay you in regret? Before he could respond, I grabbed the front of his coat and slammed him against the porch railing. His smugness vanished in an instant. What the? Because the next word that leaves your mouth will decide whether you walk off this porch or crawl. His breath hitched. You think I'm scared of you? No, I said, leaning close enough for him to smell the quiet rage beneath my calm. I think you should be. He shoved at my shoulders, but I didn't move. I'd fought harder men in padded rooms, men who screamed and clawed and broke bones for fun. This man was soft, too used to winning without trying. I twisted his wrist until he winced. Here's how this works. You'll tell your little gambling friends that the Rakes family is no longer your business. You'll erase every debt with that name on it. He tried to laugh, but it came out shaky. Lady, you have no idea who I work for, I smiled. Then maybe they should know who I am. He blinked, confused. Who are you? I released him, stepped back, and said quietly, the wrong sister to mess with. He adjusted his coat, sneering to cover his fear. You'll regret this. Maybe, I said, but not tonight. I opened the door, stared him down until he turned and walked to his car. His engine roared to life, tires screeching as he sped away into the dark. When I turned back, Mrs. Bell was standing in the hallway, trembling. What did you do? She whispered. I walked past her slowly, brushing her shoulder. What you all should have done a long time ago, stood up to evil. She didn't respond. For the first time since I arrived, she looked small. Human. Afraid in the way victims are when they realize the balance has shifted. I went into Sky's room. She was awake, clutching her doll. Mommy, who was that man? I sat on the bed beside her. Just someone who forgot what happens when you hurt the wrong people. She nodded sleepily. You scared him? I smiled softly. Good. When she drifted off, I sat there for a long while, watching her breathe. The world outside had gone quiet again, but it wasn't over. Men like Marlowe never vanished after one warning. They came back smarter, crueler, hungrier. But I wasn't afraid. I had spent 10 years learning how to live with monsters. Now I was teaching them how it felt. He came to collect a debt he left with fear in his eyes. But I knew men like Marlowe never walk away for good. The next time he returned, he wouldn't be alone. The next morning, the house felt wrong. It was too quiet, too still. The kind of stillness that comes right before something breaks. Even the birds outside didn't sing. I stood at the window, watching a black car idling across the street. Its engine purred like a patient predator. The tinted windows gave nothing away, but I didn't need to see their faces to know who it was. Marlowe, and whoever he'd brought with him. Darius noticed the car, too. He looked nervous, lighting a cigarette with trembling hands. You shouldn't have messed with him, he muttered. You don't know these people, Lisa. I know enough, I said. He turned to me, eyes wide. You think you're tough, huh? You think because you broke one man's wrist that you can scare the world? I stepped closer, my voice quiet but sharp. I don't need to scare the world, Darius, just the kind that beats its wife and sells its soul. He flinched, but his fear wasn't for me, it was for himself, and maybe, finally, that was a start. I went to check on Sky. She was in her room, coloring on the floor, humming softly, her world still innocent, still untainted. I knelt beside her, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Sweetheart, I said gently, if anyone comes to the door today, you don't open it. You hide under the bed and stay there until I come for you, okay? Her eyes grew wide. Is it the bad man? I hesitated. Yes, baby. But Mommy's not scared of him. She nodded bravely and whispered, then I'm not scared either. I kissed her forehead, my chest tightening. Courage runs in blood, I thought. Minutes later, there was a knock at the door, loud, deliberate, twice. Not like last night's warning. This was a demand. Mrs. Bell shouted from her room. Who is it? I answered. No one for you. When I opened the door, Marlowe stood there again, but this time he wasn't alone. Two men flanked him, both built like brick walls. One of them carried a metal bat. Morning, sweetheart, Marlowe said, his tone smooth, but his eyes full of venom. You and I have unfinished business. I leaned against the doorway, arms folded. You brought company. I guess fear doesn't travel light. His smile faded. You humiliated me, Lisa, in front of my people. You think you can just walk away from that? I didn't walk, I said softly. I warned. He took a step closer. You're going to pay that debt. One way or another. The bat scraped against the concrete porch. The sound made my skin crawl, but I didn't move. I met his gaze until he blinked first. Darius isn't here, I said. If you want someone to hurt, find the man who owes you. He chuckled darkly. Oh, I plan to. But first, I thought I'd collect some interest. His hand reached for my arm, and before he could touch me, I caught his wrist again and twisted hard. His body lurched forward, and the motion sent the bat flying from his man's grip. I kicked it away, my instincts from Crestwood kicking in like muscle memory. The second man charged. I sidestepped, slammed the door into his shoulder, and brought my knee up into his ribs. The air left his lungs with a groan. Marlowe stumbled back, clutching his wrist again, the same one I'd bent before. You crazy? I told you, I cut in, my voice low and calm. You should have stayed gone. He backed up, eyes flicking toward his car. His men followed, limping and cursing. As they retreated, he pointed at me with his uninjured hand. This isn't over. I smiled faintly. It never is. When the car sped off, I exhaled slowly. My pulse was steady, my hands calm. Mrs. Bell appeared in the hallway, trembling. You're insane. They'll come back. They'll kill us all. Then maybe, I said softly, you'll finally understand what it felt like for Lisa every night she prayed for peace and no one came. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. I went to Sky's room. She was hiding under the bed, clutching her doll, eyes wide but dry. Are they gone? She whispered. Yes, I said gently, helping her out. And they won't come back here again. She hugged me tightly. You're brave, Mommy. I smiled faintly, holding her close. No, baby, I'm just done being afraid. But deep down, I knew Marlowe's words weren't empty. Men like him don't let humiliation go unpunished. He wouldn't stop, not until someone ended it. And I was done waiting for rescue. He came back with backup. Next time, he'd come for blood. But so would I. Sleep became a stranger after that night. Every creak of the house sounded like a threat. Every gust of wind felt like a warning. I started sleeping with a knife hidden under my pillow, not because I feared them, but because I was done being unprepared. Marlowe's face haunted my thoughts. Not his smirk, not his threats, but his confidence. He hadn't come here on impulse. He'd come here knowing no one would stop him. That meant protection, connections, power. And power always left a paper trail. The next morning, after dropping Sky off at a neighbor's for playtime, I slipped out with the old ledger tucked inside my coat. The bus ride downtown was long. But the silence gave me time to think about Lisa, about her bruises, about all the nights she must have cried quietly while the world slept. I walked into the local records office, the kind of place that smelled like dust and old ink. The clerk barely looked up when I asked for business ownership files. R. Marlowe, I said. Marlowe Automotive, and any associated partnership. He scrolled through his computer, chewing gum loudly. You family? Something like that. He printed a few pages and slid them across the counter. You didn't hear this from me, but half the cops in this town drive cars serviced by that man's shop. He sponsors their charity events, keeps them in his pocket. I looked at the papers. Shell companies, cash transfers, donations under fake names. It was a network of corruption disguised as community service. Marlowe wasn't just a criminal, he was protected, and Lisa had been paying the price for his protection all along. I thanked the clerk and left, clutching the papers so tightly the edges cut my palm. The blood that smeared across the corner of the page didn't bother me. It felt right, my blood for her justice. When I got back home, Darius was pacing the living room. He looked panicked, sweating, muttering into his phone. Marlowe, listen, he stammered. I'm fixing it, okay? I'll get you your money. You don't have to. I snatched the phone from his hand and ended the call. Stop begging, he spun on me. You don't understand. He'll kill me. I stared at him coldly. You think your death would balance what you did to Lisa? You think your fear is punishment enough? He looked down, trembling. What do you want from me? The truth, he swallowed hard. I didn't know he'd go that far. Lisa begged me to stop borrowing. She said Marlowe came by when I was gone, that his voice broke. He hurt her, Nia. He said he'd take Sky next if we didn't pay. My body went still. I felt something inside me snap, not rage this time, but something deeper, colder. Lisa hadn't just been beaten. She'd been silenced, not by fear, but by men who traded her pain for profit. Darius fell to his knees. I didn't mean for it to happen like that. I crouched down, forcing him to meet my eyes. You watched it happen. That's worse than doing it yourself. He started to cry, big, broken sobs, but his tears didn't move me. They came too late, too cheap. I dropped the folded pages in front of him. This is your world, Darius. Corruption, violence, power. The same system that protected Marlowe protected you too, but that's about to end. He looked up, eyes wide. You can't fight him. You'll get yourself killed. I stood, tucking Lisa's notebook under my arm. You're wrong. I'm not fighting him. He frowned. Then what are you doing? I turned toward the door, my voice low. I'm finishing what Lisa started. That night, I sat at the edge of my bed, planning every step. I knew where Marlowe's garage was. I knew who worked there, and I knew exactly what needed to burn to make the city finally see him for what he was. They took everything from Lisa, her freedom, her voice, her peace. Now I was coming for everything they built from her pain, and I wasn't bringing mercy. Marlowe's garage sat under a flickering neon sign that hummed like a dying insect. The place smelled of motor oil, burnt rubber, and the stale arrogance of men who think money makes them invisible. I walked up to the roll-up door just after midnight and watched the shadowed shape move inside. Through the slats, I could see a pair of boots moving, then a silhouette stoop to lift something heavy. This was a shop where favors turned into cash, and cash turned into silence. Tonight, I wanted to pry that silence open. I slipped through the side gate like a shadow. The gravel crunched under my boots, loud as a shout in the still night. A light clicked on inside, one of those high beams that throws everything into sharp relief. The men who worked for Marlowe were there, two asleep on rickety chairs, one bent under a hood, another counting bills with hands that smelled like grease. He looked up when I opened the door. Marlowe's face was a map of small victories, smooth, confident, unbothered. He didn't expect me. That fact was a kind of weapon. Back so soon, he said, amusement curling his lip like smoke. You forget who your debtor's wife is, I said. My voice was soft, but there was cold in it. Or maybe you just like to forget until it's convenient. He laughed, a liquid sound. You think you can come here and threaten me? You're playing with fire, sweetheart. I stepped inside. The fluorescent light made his skin look pallid. Up close, he was not a wall, Just a man who'd built a fortress of other people's fear. Where do you keep your ledgers? I asked. The one with Darius's name on it. A flicker of something crossed his face, annoyance, then calculation. You've got nerve, but you want paper? Go look under the counter. It's the same place you'd look if you were anything like the rest of them. I moved like I'd done this before. Quiet hands, quick wrists. The counter drawer stuck, but it opened with a sigh, and there it was, a battered ledger, the same neat cruelty in each slanted number. I flipped pages, eyes scanning. There it was, payments, favors, names. Names of small-time crooks and men who liked the taste of other people's fear. But under a folded receipt, tucked like bad currency, I found something else, a photo. It was a picture of Darius with Marlowe in the back of a club, drinks sweating in their hands. Beside them, a woman I recognized instantly, Mrs. Bell, laughing, her hand on Darius's shoulder. And in the background, at a table, a younger man I'd never seen before, his expression set like stone, his name written on the back of the photo in Marlowe's scratchy hand. Agent R. Agent R. The pieces clicked. Marlowe's donations, his police connections, this was the money that greased more than cops' hands. It greased the doors that should have swung open the day Lisa spoke, the mouths that stayed shut when she left bruises as testimony. Agent R was the kind of man who looked at a wife's torn dress and wrote it down as domestic, nothing more. My hands trembled slightly, but only with a focused calm. This was bigger than debt. This was a system. A net with hands in every corner, and Lisa had been caught in the middle while they pretended not to see. Who's Agent R? I asked, closing the ledger and watching Marlowe's eyes. He shrugged, too casual. Just a friend. People who help keep things quiet. People who help hide crimes, I said. People who keep women paying in fear. He reached for the phone, but my knee connected with his thigh and he hissed. You're playing a dangerous game, he spat, more out of surprise than threat. Maybe, I said, but there's one thing you can't buy, me. You can't buy the voice you stole from my sister. He laughed again, brittle now. And what are you going to do with that voice? I slid the photo out from my pocket and held it up to the light. I'm going to make it loud. The men in the shop stirred. Marlowe's smirk faltered because he felt the shifting air, the kind that comes right before fire touches timber. He had money, connections, men who owed him favors. I had nothing but a ledger, a photo, and a fury honed in a room where screams were part of the wallpaper. As I left the garage, the neon sign buzzing above me like a distant hive, I felt something settle under my skin, the knowledge that the fight had grown teeth. If I exposed Agent R, I'd cut off Marlowe's shield. If I cut his shield, I'd make him bleed where he'd never expected to. But putting the photo where it mattered would make enemies of more than Marlowe. It would make me the target of men who never forgave what they thought of as debts unpaid. I walked back to the house with the ledger tucked under my arm and the photograph burning a hole in my pocket. I walked out of his garage with a picture I couldn't unsee. Expose Agent R and I tear the whole web down, but pull the wrong thread, and the people who wove it will come from me first. By the time dawn touched the horizon, I hadn't slept a minute. The photograph lay on the table beside me, Lisa's life trapped in a glossy square of proof. Darius's forced grin, Mrs. Bell's laughter, Marlowe's hand shaking another man's. Agent R, the man who made monsters invisible. I could almost hear Lisa's voice in my head. Nia, they'll never believe you. They believe him. Maybe she was right once. But she hadn't known the version of me sitting in this kitchen now, the one who had nothing left to lose. I waited until Sky was fed and safe at the neighbors again before I moved. The town library had old computers in the back corner, the kind no one used anymore. That was exactly what I needed, obscurity. I scanned the photo, saved it under an anonymous name, then opened an email window. No names, no greetings, no signature, just the subject line, "You missed this case." The recipients were every journalist I could find who had written about domestic tragedies, the ones who claimed to care but never saw the rot beneath the headlines. Then I attached the picture and hit send. My hands trembled. Not with fear, with finality. As the progress bar finished, I whispered, "This is for you, Lisa." When I left the library, the air felt strange, too quiet, too watchful. That's when I saw it, a dark sedan parked across the street, engine running, tinted windows. The same shape I'd seen near the house before. A man in a suit stood leaning against the car, sunglasses hiding his eyes even in the gray morning. He was tall, lean, with the kind of posture that spoke of authority without words. Agent R, my blood went cold. He pushed off the car and walked toward me slowly, like a man strolling through a park instead of closing in on prey. "Mrs. Rakes," he said calmly, or should I say, "Nia?" He smiled faintly. "We've been watching you. You've caused quite a stir." His voice was smooth, practiced, bureaucratic evil in a tailored suit. "You have something that doesn't belong to you." I met his gaze. "You mean the truth?" His jaw flexed. "You shouldn't have sent that photo. The people in it, they're protected." I took a slow step closer. "Protected? Or owned?" He sighed, as if I were an unruly child. "You don't understand how this works." "Oh, I do," I said. "You build your empires on women's silence. But here's the thing about silence. Once it breaks, it can't be rebuilt." His smile disappeared. "You've made powerful enemies, Miss Sterling." The name hit me like a jolt. My real name, the one from my old life before the hospital. He'd done his homework. I forced a calm breath. "Then I hope they're not afraid of a little daylight." He leaned in close enough that I could smell his cologne, expensive, sterile. "Be smart, Nia. Delete the files. Stay quiet. You'll live longer." I smiled thinly. "If you were going to kill me, you wouldn't be warning me." His expression darkened. "Last chance. Tell your boss," I said, "that Lisa Rakes didn't die for nothing." Then I turned and walked away before he could answer. My legs wanted to tremble, but my spirit refused. Every step I took away from him felt like walking through fire. But I kept walking. By the time I reached the house, Darius was pacing the floor again, his phone buzzing nonstop. "What did you do?" he demanded. "Marlowe's men are furious. They say the cops are sniffing around the shop." "Good," I said. "Let them choke on their own smoke." He grabbed my arm. "You don't get it. They'll come for us." I looked him dead in the eye. "Then let them. I'm done hiding from ghosts." That night, the sky broke open with rain. I sat by the window, holding Sky as she slept against my shoulder. Lightning flashed across the glass, and for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the storm, because I was the storm. I had pulled the first thread, and the web had started to unravel. But I didn't know yet. The spider was already crawling toward my door. The rain didn't stop. It came down like the sky was trying to wash the town clean of its sins, but some stains don't fade that easy. Inside the house, every window rattled under the wind's fists. Mrs. Bell was pacing, mumbling prayers she'd never said before. Trina sat stiff in the corner, clutching her son and staring at me like I was both salvation and doom. Darius kept glancing at the door, a cigarette trembling between his fingers. "They'll come," he muttered. "You humiliated them. They'll come." "I know," I said quietly, loading the old revolver I'd found in his drawer days earlier. It still smelled of neglect and cowardice. "That's why I'm staying awake." He stared at me. "You'll get us all killed." I met his eyes. "You already did." The clock ticked toward midnight. Each second felt like a heartbeat, counting down to something inevitable. Then came the first sound, a car door slamming outside, then another. Headlights swept across the living room wall like two white ghosts. Mrs. Bell gasped, "Oh, Lord, they're here." I stood slowly. "Take Sky. Go to the back room. Lock the door and don't open it until I call your name." She didn't argue this time. She just grabbed the child and ran, her old slippers slapping against the floor. Through the rain-streaked window, I saw them. 2 cars, 4 men. Marlowe stepped out first, umbrella in one hand, arrogance in the other. Behind him came Agent R, dry, calm, untouched by weather, as if the rain itself obeyed him. They walked toward the porch. Darius whispered, maybe if I talk to them." I cut him off. "You've done enough talking for a lifetime." The knock came, 3 sharp raps, like judgment on wood. I opened the door before they could knock again. Marlowe's grin was slick under the streetlight. "Evening, sweetheart. You've been busy." Agent R's gaze swept the room. "You put good men in danger with that stunt of yours. You think exposing one photo changes anything? I leaned against the frame. It already did, the journalist called back. That picture's on 3 desks in the city newsroom by now. You can't hide behind badges forever. His eyes narrowed. You underestimate what silence is worth, and you underestimate what truth costs. Marlowe snorted. Enough poetry. Give us the ledger, the photo, and whatever else you stole, and maybe we'll leave this dump standing. I stepped aside just enough for them to see Darius behind me, small, shaking cigarette ash falling like snow. Ask him, I said. He's the one who owed you everything. Marlowe's grin vanished. Oh, I plan to. He lunged forward, but I raised the revolver. The click of the hammer froze him mid-step. Move, I said softly, and you'll find out how quiet rain can get when it hits blood. Agent R's voice dropped to a whisper. You won't shoot. You're not a killer. I met his gaze. That's what everyone said before they locked me away. For a heartbeat, the room was pure white, and I saw fear flicker across both their faces. Just a flicker, but real. Darius stepped forward, voice trembling. Please, just go. I'll pay. I'll do whatever you want. Marlowe laughed bitterly. You don't have anything left? He shoved Darius hard. My brother-in-law stumbled, hit the table, and the gun in my hand steadied itself like it had a will of its own. I didn't pull the trigger. Not yet. Leave, I said. Now, before the rest of the world hears the kind of men you really are. Agent R straightened his coat. You can't protect them forever. The story dies if the storyteller does. I smiled faintly. Then I'd better make my story unforgettable. They backed off slowly, the rain swallowing their silhouettes as they climbed into the cars and drove off into the storm. For a long moment, I just stood there, heart pounding, rain dripping from my hair onto the floorboards. Mrs. Bell peeked from the hallway. Are they gone? Yes, I whispered, lowering the gun. For now. Darius slumped into a chair, face pale. You just made enemies you can't run from. I looked toward Sky's door. I don't run, not anymore. Outside, thunder rolled like applause from some dark god. They'd left the porch that night, but men like them never really leave. By morning, the world would know the truth, and every secret I dragged into the light would have a price. Morning came like a bruised whisper after a night that refused to end. The world outside still smelled of rain and gasoline, but inside the house it smelled like peace, fragile, trembling, new. I stood by the window, watching the sky turn from gray to gold. My reflection looked back at me, tired eyes, split knuckles, but a face that finally felt like mine. The newspaper on the table carried the headline, I'd been waiting for, local businessman and police officer under investigation for corruption, abuse, and bribery. Below it were the photos, Marlowe in handcuffs, Agent R escorted by Internal Affairs. The story had broken overnight. The journalists had done what Lisa never lived to see. They believed a woman's pain. Mrs. Bell sat in the corner, her hands folded tight around a cup of tea gone cold. Her face looked years older. Trina was silent, her usual venom gone, replaced by something almost human, shame. Darius, he hadn't said a word since dawn. He just stared at the headline like he couldn't read it, or maybe couldn't believe it. When I turned to him, his voice was barely a whisper. You destroyed everything. I shook my head softly. No, I just tore down the walls that were built on her suffering. He rubbed his face, eyes red. You don't understand. Marlowe's people, he wasn't the only one. There are others, bigger names. They'll come after us now. I met his gaze. Let them. He stared at me for a long moment, then said something I never expected to hear. I didn't deserve her, but thank you. There was no forgiveness in my heart for him, not yet, maybe not ever, but for the first time his voice didn't carry pride or excuses. It carried loss, and that was something close to truth. I looked down the hallway toward Sky's room. She was sitting cross-legged on her bed, coloring quietly, sunlight spilling across her face. The bruises under her innocence were fading. The ones on her soul would take longer. Sky, I said softly, kneeling beside her, do you know what today is? She looked up, eyes bright. No. It's the day the bad men went away. Her little brow furrowed. Forever? I smiled faintly. Maybe not forever, but long enough for us to breathe. She nodded solemnly, then held up her drawing, a picture of two women holding hands under a bright yellow sun. "That's Mommy," she said, pointing at one. "And that's you." My throat tightened. "It's beautiful." "She said you were her brave side," Sky whispered, tracing the crayon lines. "She told me once, before she went away." Tears blurred my vision before I could stop them. "She was wrong, baby. She was the brave one." I just finished what she started. Behind us, I heard a knock on the door, softer this time, cautious. When I opened it, two officers stood there. One held a file folder, the other a solemn expression. "Miss Sterling?" the older one asked. "We just came to let you know," they confessed. "Everything. Your sister's case is being reopened." I nodded, unable to speak. "Lisa's name will be cleared," he continued gently. "You did good, ma'am. You gave her a voice." I thanked him quietly as they left, closing the door behind me. For a long moment I just stood there listening to the rain's last drops fading outside, like the world itself was exhaling relief. When I finally sat down, I opened Lisa's old notebook one last time. The last page had just 5 words written in shaky pen strokes. "One day she'll be free." I smiled through the tears. "She is, Lisa," I whispered. "You are." That night, I tucked Sky into bed, kissed her forehead, and looked at the stars through the cracked window. They didn't look distant anymore. They looked like tiny candles burning for the ones we'd lost. The house was quiet, not the silence of fear, but the kind that comes after truth, the kind my sister never got to hear. I poured myself a glass of water, walked out onto the porch, and breathed in the night air. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, not for us, not this time. And for the first time in 10 years, I smiled without guilt. They took my sister's life thinking it would end her story, but all they did was hand me the pen, and I wrote her ending, not with fear, but with fire. Because sometimes justice doesn't knock softly. Sometimes she kicks the door down wearing your face. Did you like the story? Which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you enjoyed the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep creating more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. There's a lot more waiting for you on my channel. Tales by Aunt Emery. Don't forget to subscribe.